Hey everybody, Steve here. I wanted to get something out there on the written blog today, but that didn't end up panning out. I ran out of time. It's a really busy season for me, but I still wanted to get something out there, so I thought I would give this a shot and just do a video and post it onto my YouTube channel and see where it goes from there. So anyhow, as with all of the stuff that I put out there, I pray that this is helpful to you. I pray that it's challenging to you. So yeah, let's dive in. I want to talk for a few minutes about relationships. Now, I'm not talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about just general relationships in our lives. Not just friendships, but everyone that we have around us, and most particularly, especially, the people who are in our churches and a part of our ministries, and who believe what we believe as followers of Christ. A lot of people are giving advice about relationships. They're really trying, and I think the intention is good, to help people find joy and contentment and fulfillment in their relational lives. What's interesting about this to me is that the primary advice that people give, that I've been finding that people give out there, is this: it's to declutter their relationships, to declutter their relational lives. That if there are people in their lives that don't bring them joy, that are more difficult for them, that are just don't seem to fit in a lot of ways, then those are the people you need to eliminate from your social life, from your circle. And then this will lead to a happier life, a more fulfilled life, a life with more relational joy in it. And that makes sense on some level, I think. That makes sense that if something isn't good, that you would get rid of it. We see this on Netflix right now with Marie Kondo and the tidying up show and that craze that's going on. I see people posting pictures of their closets and stuff where they have the tightly rolled towels and stuff. It's cool. It's great. I think it's an awesome concept. And the central question that Marie Kondo asks is, she asks if she holds something in front of the person and says, does this bring you joy? And if it doesn't bring you joy, it should be eliminated. Well, that's a really simple and effective way to declutter your house, to help with a closet. And I think that has bled into the relational world. And there's a lot of people who will say that relationally you should do something similar, that you should think about a person in your life, and if they bring you joy, then keep them in your life. And if they don't bring you joy, then bam, cut them out, and there's a problem here, particularly when we encounter the church and Christian community, because I'm seeing this bleed into Christian community, this system of thinking. And the problem is that when we bring the world's rules for relationship into the church and into the life of a Christian, what usually ends up happening is we get the opposite of what it was that we were after in the first place. So many times, Christians, say, hey, man, if you're not for me, if you're not bringing me joy, if you're somebody who's difficult, who's constantly, I'm cutting you out of my life. And they're going after happiness and joy. And what they're going to end up with is the opposite of that. And the reason that you end up with the opposite of it is because when we make this move relationally, it's primarily a selfish move. It's for me, it's for my benefit, primarily at your expense, whoever it is. And I will never, ever capture something that is a gift from God, joy and peace and all those things, through a selfish strategy. It won't work. That's not how God set it up. Now, we all have people who are challenging in our lives, depending on our personality type, right? Every single one of us has people that we would probably, if we could, eliminate from our lives entirely. Some of us, we experience this with our families, right? And you're like, man, if I just could, have a family get together and not see this person, then it would be fine. And that's actually a lie. It's not how it really works. And before we go any further with this, I just want to make it clear, kind of like I did with the anxiety written blogs, that I'm talking about common relationships that we all have, common challenges in relationships that we all have. I'm not talking about uncommon exceptions that prove the rule, like abusive relationships and things like that. That's a different conversation, and there are different strategies. I'm just talking about right now on a daily basis, the people in your life, you're like, man, I would just cut those people out. And maybe you have cut people out, particularly even in a Christian context, because they make your life more difficult in some way, shape, or form. I think it's really tempting for us to do this today with differences, that people are different, right? And they're not like me, and I don't know how to relate to them. And relating to them is much harder because I am a Democrat and they're a Republican, or I'm a Republican and they're a Democrat, or whatever it is. There's a different rules for relationships, particularly amongst Christians. And we have to display this for the world. There's never a more important time to display this very strategy for the rest of the world. And we see it in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. What Paul is doing here, there is a church in the city of Corinth, and they are having this particular struggle. They are having trouble relating to each other because they're not all the same. They're all very, very different. And they come from different backgrounds, and they have different amounts of money and different social status. And it creates a unique social challenge, and they can't figure out how to put everything together. And so what naturally happens there is some people look at some other people and they say, you know what? You out of my life. My life is easier without you. And this is what's happening. And Paul addresses that by making up this metaphor, which is the human body. And he's saying that you guys all are different parts, just like your body has different parts, and you got to work together. But let's not miss this truth. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. This is verse 21. I'm just going to read a couple of verses. And Paul says this, using this metaphor. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. I want to read that first verse again, verse 21. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. Okay, so don't miss what Paul is doing here with this metaphor. The eye in the human body, if you were just standing up with your hands to your side, your eye is above your hand, right? And then look at the second one. He says, then the head cannot say to the feet. Your head is above your feet. So the problem that Paul is addressing here is that some people are kind of socially placing themselves over other people because they perceive them to be weaker or to be of less value to the community or of less value to their lives. And he's saying, you can't do that in the body of Christ. You can't look at somebody that you perceive to be weaker or you perceive to be not a fit in your life and say, I don't need you. I'm cutting you out of my life. You can't declutter your relationships in the church. You can't do it. But it's not a free-for-all. It's not a free-for-all. So what do we do with this? Well, I think there's a really, really popular word out there with regards to relationships, and the word is boundaries. And it's an important word, and it's a word that we need to make sure that we're always incorporating. But I think sometimes when we set boundaries relationally in our lives, we think we're setting boundaries, but what we're really doing is that we're drawing borderlines. We're not setting boundaries, we're drawing borderlines in our lives. Boundaries are designed to keep someone in and to create a system of rules for them to participate in my life. That's what boundaries are for, right? It's not a free-for-all. I'm setting up rules, but the goal is to keep them involved. Borders are to keep people out. Borders are territorial. Border says, this is my land, this is the land of my life, and that's the land of your life, and here's the borderline, and we don't cross it. You and I stay on each other's respective sides, and that's it. And I think sometimes we think we're drawing boundary lines, and we're really drawing borders. So my question to you and my challenge to you is this: which one are you doing? Are you setting up boundaries, or are you drawing borders? Are you cutting people out of your life because they're more difficult for you? They are taking up time. And believe me, I'm not identifying any one kind of person, because every single one of us has challenging people in our life. And every single one of us are the challenging person in someone else's life at one point in time or another. And that is just the truth. So this isn't about one kind of personality or another kind of personality. We all fit in these categories all the time. So my challenge to you is, are you setting up boundaries or are you drawing borders? And if you are somebody, you realize, man, I'm drawing borders. I am keeping people out because it makes my life easier. Guess what? You may find that for a time it makes things simpler or easier, but you're not going to capture the joy and the peace and the contentment that you're actually after, because you're going at it with a strategy that is not from the Lord. So my suggestion for you is to do it backwards and realize that the solution is to set up boundaries and to keep people involved in my life, because so often the people that seem to fit the least in my life are the ones that I need the most. God may teach you tremendous things through those connections with those people. And like I said, sometimes you are that person in someone's life, and you will be the receiver of the grace and the patience in someone else's life when things are difficult for you and maybe you are more work. So it goes around for everybody. But that's my thought today. That's my challenge. We can't declutter our Christian lives. We can't do it as Jesus followers. We don't get the license to do that and just call it really super easy. But we do get to set up boundaries with the goal of keeping people in our lives, but at the appropriate times and at the appropriate seasons and in the appropriate ways. There's a difference between setting up boundaries and drawing borderlines. My friends, please be people that set up boundaries, not people that draw borders. That's my encouragement to you. I hope that that's challenging to you today. And maybe sometime soon I'll post another video. Who knows? Maybe this is going to be a giant flop, but we'll see. I hope that it's helpful to you guys. See ya.